does get a little bit confusing because we have segments of our community. The school system is different from us. We don't control certain economic development engines in our city. For example, people think that we have a tremendous influence over the Superdome and also over the convention center and also over other larger projects in our city. That's another discussion, which is a good discussion so people understand when they're watching our meetings. But I'm appreciative of the fact that you all participated, that you are motivated to do it again. And again, I just go back to what I started with, was to thank Councilmember Harris for doing this. And also this weekend emphasized to me at the Youth and Young Adult Expo at the Convention Center that there are a lot of resources out there for our youth, a lot of organizations that are reaching out to our youth. Today we're hearing Cafe Reconcile, we're hearing Council Member's Office, we're hearing YEP, and we're hearing from others who have resources, the Youth Empowerment Project, who have resources that can really help our city to grow. I just want to encourage all people and all those who advocate for and are guardians and parents to youth to recognize that those resources are out there. This weekend, we were taking applications, or the city was taking applications. There are 1,000 jobs out there, for youth that were created because the city council supported what the Office of Workforce Development brought forth. So, but the main thing is thank you all very much for your presentation today. Thank you for participating. And that's a great thing to do, to have youth come together to talk about civic engagement, what's going on in our city, and how we can make our city better and to enhance the quality of life for our youth. Thank you.
Well, first, I want to also thank Councilman Harris for doing this. much more of this is needed throughout the district, throughout the city. So again, thank you, Councilman Harris, for the youth town hall meeting. I want to congratulate both of you, or just encourage both of you. I know it's not easy speaking in a public forum and all eyes on you under the bright lights, but you both did a great job. So congratulations on that. I have a quick question. I've been asking some youth and getting different answers. So I want to ask you all and get your take on it. At what point, and there's no right or wrong answer. I'm just asking this because I'm doing a bit of a study myself. All right. At what point or how much personal accountability would you put on a teenager for committing a crime? There's no right or wrong answer. I'm not sure why I ask this, because we get a lot of people that say, well, it's not enough for teens to do. It's not enough for the youth to do. Perhaps the elected officials dropped the ball. Perhaps the parents dropped the ball, or the schools dropped the ball. But I rarely hear, hey, I made a mistake. And
Okay. Well, that's a great question. I would say that, I don't know, do you want a percentage of personal accountability? It's hard because I think it goes down to the subject of socialization. If all you know is gang banging and the only way you can get real money is selling drugs or something, it's not necessarily your choice. It's just what you're aware of or what you know. Mm-hmm. I would say that, of course, free will still exists in some capacity, right? I mean, if you murder somebody, that's objectively wrong. But at the same time, we have to think and be empathetic of the people that are living in situations that are not like ourselves. I'm pretty sure most of us are pretty fortunate in our living situations. Not everybody has that. May have abusive parents who have low income. There's so many different factors in the intersectionality of the issue between youth and crime. I would be here rambling for a good hour or so if I wanted to do that. But I think that, yes, there is some personal accountability, but I think that it's naive to say that it can only be personal accountability.
I agree. She couldn't say it better, but it's definitely starts at home as much as it's the person. Like they do know right from wrong. You do give them some accountability, but some people don't grow up fortunate enough to be able to say, I'm not going to sell drugs or I'm not going to go rob someone because they're not fortunate enough to have those things that person made. So it's like a war on each other, almost like it's going to be ongoing until like, and to make your point, back to your point, like it is enough stuff for people to like the youth to do, but feel like it need to be promoted better. And if it's thought to be promoted better, I always like the interns to get more interns at Reconcile. Always, well, I just told them because they told me, but I'm like, if we promote and look at things differently, and it's areas where that number can expound. So I'll say look at promoting things differently for the youth, especially because that's what they looking at the internet. It will be better. I'm not saying it will change, but maybe it will have slight changes, but that's where the better will come. So yeah, it's half and half. Like parents got to take accountability, but also people know right from wrong. So you do give them some accountability.
Well, I'm often find myself in the middle, not knowing. I feel what agency, Ms. Raven said, like absolutely. If this is all you know, then how do you grow out of that environment? But then I hear from some people like, well, that's all fine and dandy, but I was a victim of that crime, and I was jacked or I was harmed or my family or child was harmed. So what are you going to do about that? So I'm kind of in that middle, and I think we all find ourselves in that,
Yeah.
like right in the middle, being pulled in both directions. So it's just interesting to get some feedback from our youth. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councilmember King. Councilmember Thomas.
First of all, again, thank you to Councilmember Harris. I like the format, and I think it was a sophisticated way to do it. It's obvious that it was engaging and thought-provoking, more than just a rally or convening. And I think it lends itself to, as a policymaker, what you wanted to get out of it, but also the talent of the young people who are involved. I wasn't going to talk until the young man talked about being frustrated with the answers. So I went into my little brain and thought about it. Said, don't be frustrated by the lack of answers to the questions, because the question can set the table for answers in the future. That's how history works. So though there's a level of frustration from one generation to the next, one century, one decade to the next, from our own freedom to our culture to how we live, you got to remember those questions were asked long before we got to that point where they had answered. What you have to appreciate is the fact that you were thoughtful enough to ask the question, and that until your generation, the group that's thoughtful enough, until you get the answers, you're going to keep asking the questions. So know that that's a good thing. Society doesn't always respond on time and in time. Councilmember King's question is an extremely good one in terms of we're in an age where there's so much going awry, especially when you look at the social data and the statistics, right? In the African-American community, only 36% of our kids are growing up in a household with a responsible adult. So if it's only 36%, what do you do with the other 64%? We live in a society where in the inner city, Black males make up the predominant statistics in terms of unemployment. How can in the city, New Orleans, with 60% African-American, have 50% of its men, Black men, unemployed? How can you have 37% of your 16 to 24-year-olds living at or below the poverty level? But then society, because it hasn't done what it hasn't done, is expecting people who are incapable of being responsible to being responsible. And I think that Councilmember King, your question was on time because it's timely. This morning, we had a segment with Captain Jason Muhammad and Brother Calvin about that whole responsibility thing on the Good Morning Show. And so with Brother Calvin Pep, who's a intervention specialist and crisis specialist, he had been in and out of prison and home since he was 8 years old. So one of the questions to him this morning was that, what about personal responsibility? And so the question was, how is an 8-year-old all of a sudden responsible if all that 8-year-old had ever seen was gunplay, drugs, or raise themselves? So even though it's a great question, Councilmember King, and I think people are frustrated by the fact that they haven't had answers, in many cases, what society hasn't done is been strategic enough and resourceful enough to fill in the gap for those people who don't have the ability to be responsible because they haven't even aged into the area of responsibility. Would we want them to be responsible? Absolutely. Would we want them to be in an environment be responsible? Absolutely. Should they be responsible? Absolutely. But I think I am responsible if all I've ever seen is gunplay, respond to gunplay. I think I am being responsible if I don't have nothing to eat and you got something I want to go get something to eat. I think I'm being responsible in the world that has shaped my thinking. So though that's a legitimate question, I think the greater question is to society now that we know all this, right? Why are we still asking who's responsible instead of being responsible? And I think that's where we are now.
Thank you, Councilmember Thomas. I want to thank you again for being here today, for helping to put on the Youth Town Hall, and for participating and answering provocative questions today. You know, it is hard, as Councilmember King said, to get up here and talk and be in front of all the folks, but you guys did a fantastic job, and I just want to thank you yet again. So are there any closing comments from either of you?
I mean, I just gotta say, I agree. I love the way he stated that the answer to that question, honestly, because I'm thinking about it now. It's not because basically they've been raised up too fast. Like they gotta take responsibility at this young age that people at the age of 21 and stuff like that should be doing. And yeah, that's it. Yeah, that was a great answer, honestly. But yeah.
Well, he's always profound. So thank you, Councilmember Thomas. And thank you, Terrence, for being here.
Yeah, and then I just had one thing. I wanted to say thank you for your profound words again. It kind of reminds me, I'm trying to think of what rapper, but Thug Life. If anybody,
Tupac.
yeah, Tupac. Right. I'm gonna try to say this in the most PG way, but you know, the hate you give little infants F's everybody. And I think that's honestly great poetry and very I think it's something that we all need to think about.
Yeah.
Because it's saddening that children have to deal with things that are just so gruesome that they can even watch an R-rated movie legally, but they're experiencing in their real lives of violence and drugs, and it's just normal. And how do we find the new normal? And I know that's like a phrase that everybody used after COVID, but like it's true. How do we see these experiences that we've been dealing with our whole lives? I mean, Gen Z, millennials, you know, Gen Alpha, whatever generations you all want to mention, we've had to experience this our whole entire lives, and we've just become used to it. And how do we get rid of that numbness, that apathy? It's so dangerous. But I think it's great to ask these questions because they are important questions for all of us to think about.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. All right, Anita, now that we have a quorum, can we go ahead and approve the minutes?
Sure.
I'll move to approve.
Second.
Seconded by Councilmember Green. All in favor?
Aye.
It's unanimous. Thank you. Moving on to the next item.
Next item is the Youth Empowerment Project. We have Darren McCall, the Chief Program Officer, and Amanda Lindsay, the Works Director for YEP.
And you guys know the drill. If you could just state your name.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Darren McCall. I'm the Chief Program Officer at the Youth Empowerment Project, or YEP.
And good afternoon. I'm Amanda Lindsay. I'm a program director at YEP that oversees the workforce training program and our enrichment program that houses our after-school Camp Mariposa and summer camp programs.
So we wanted to take a couple minutes to talk about YEP generally and broadly, talk about some of the things we've been up to this past year, some things we have coming up this summer, and obviously take any questions that come up today. But thank you, Councilmember Harris, for the invite, and thank you to the whole council. I think for all your ongoing support and everything that we do across the city. So this is our mission statement and core purpose. So we engage young people ages 7 and up through community-based education, mentoring, employment readiness, enrichment programs to help them develop skills and strengthen ties to family and community. And really, you know, I really like our core purpose even more, is that what that all boils down to is helping young people improve their lives and the lives of others. So that idea that, you know, we can help you sort of stabilize, develop your skills, move on to a next opportunity while you're here at YEP. The idea is you're going to pay that forward, and whether that's giving back to your community, supporting your family, or even maybe coming back to YEP to support and sort of give to that next generation. It's just a big part of the work that we do at YEP. So we'll talk about kind of our 4 program areas. This is how we normally describe our work in these 4 kind of buckets of programming. And I'll talk about YEP Mentors and YEP Educates, and Amanda will cover the other 2. So our YEP Mentors programming. This is the program and the services that YEP was founded to do originally in 2004. But what it looks like today is we have several different contracts with different sort of public entities. So we work with the Office of Juvenile Justice, the State Office of Juvenile Justice, Juvenile Court here in Orleans Parish. We get some referrals from the DA's office here in Orleans Parish. We also do some work out in St. Charles Parish. So we work with a few entities out in that area as well. But what this looks like is wraparound and holistic mentoring and case management services. The young people would be connected to our programming. And I like to describe these young people as sort of somewhere on the juvenile justice spectrum. So that could be very early intervention. So they haven't necessarily been arrested yet, committed any crime yet, but they're maybe just sort of making some not super great decisions, sort of headed down that wrong path. We want to try to intervene early. So we have some programming for young people on that end of the spectrum. You know, and then we can kind of go all the way up the spectrum to working with people that are maybe on diversion, folks that are on parole, as well as probation. And so really trying to be intentional about supporting young people early on in the process, but also be in a space where young people sort of get back on track and have a second chance as well. And so those young folks get a very intensive amount of case management services. Oftentimes their youth advocate or their mentors making contact with them about 3 times a week. They do group activities, they do outings, field trips. Our mentors are making school visits, checking out folks in the home. So just really trying to address all of this sort of needs and develop those relationships with young people in that programming. And so our YEP Educates programming is our community-based high school equivalency preparation programming. And so we are currently operating out of 3 sites, one in Mid-City, on Broad Street, in Algiers on the West Bank on Newton Street, and then our newest location out in New Orleans East on Hayne Boulevard. And so we take anybody that's over there. So legally in Louisiana, you have to be over the age of 16 to engage in the adult ed system. So anybody 16 and up. So even though our target population is 16 to 24, we really don't say no to anybody because we know this is a need across our community. So we have many students that are in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s that are engaged in our YEP Educates programming because that is the service they need, and we meet that need for them. So individuals can come and attend classes on a weekly basis. People take the test of adult basic education when they enter the program, and then we'll retest periodically until they're getting to a level that they're ready to take the HiSET test. And so what was formerly known as the GED is now the HiSET. And so we're paying all their HiSET fees, referring them to test. And of course, if people go to test and they're not successful, they have the opportunity to still come back with us and get, tweak whatever they need to tweak. And really, we want to support them through the completion of that credential and even on into post-secondary transition opportunities.
So YEP Works is a work readiness program for 16 to 24-year-olds. We take referrals from local high schools, the community. We get unofficial referrals from the courts and the DA's office. Our students come to us for 10 weeks at a time. They're part of the time they're in a classroom setting, learning what it's like to have a job, how to write a resume, how to interview, what to wear, how to engage with people that you want to keep this job, but I don't really like these folks very much. And then the rest of the time they choose one of our businesses to practice their skills in. So we have 2 public facing businesses, a bicycle repair shop on Aretha Castle Haley Boulevard and a thrift store on Aretha Castle Haley Boulevard. So our students can go in there, work, practice running a cash register, the point of sale system, inventory, customer engagement, and they do that all with the safety net of a full-time staff member, making sure that when they make mistakes, they're coached through their mistakes. We pay our students an educational stipend to participate, much like Cafe Reconcile, where there are no taxes or anything taken out, but the young people do earn some stipends to participate and learn how to manage that money. So we also do things like get them connected to bank accounts and different activities like that. After our students have completed the initial 10 weeks of programming, they have a few different options. Some of our young people are ready to go to work and they just needed a confidence builder. So we connect them to part-time and full-time employment. Some of our students are like, I think I know what I want to do now. So we connect them to more comprehensive training programs like Cafe Reconcile or LA Green Corps, GRODAT. And then some of our students are not quite ready to move on. So they have the opportunity to stay at YEP and become our interns. And so an internship at YEP looks like them choosing one of the businesses that they want to grow their skills in and staying with us for up to 4 months while they also earn an educational stipend to do that. The ultimate goal for our young people coming through the YEP Works program is to build their confidence, to get them more ready for the work world, and to provide them with those wraparound services that are in all of our YEP programs. So we help them get state IDs. We make sure that they have closed the interview in. We make sure they have a plan for transportation and support that with bus passes and Lyft rides. And then we also make sure that young people have an idea of what their next steps want to be. So if that's looking into career exploration or post-secondary, that they're getting help with enrolling in school, filling out FAFSAs and things like that. Our YEP Enriches program is a program that houses our youngest group of participants. We can take young people as young as 7 years old. We run a 5-day-a-week after school program at both our Central City locations and now in New Orleans East. And we make sure that the young people have a safe place to play. They work on their homework. We have an education coordinator that provides comprehensive academic supports for students that have IEPs and 504s, and their parents have a lot of questions about that. We provide one-on-one tutoring support with the help of our education coordinator and community volunteers. We make sure that they get dinner and a snack. We have a drum line and a dance team and art classes, and we're running those things at both locations so young people have a place to participate. Our hours in Central City are 3 to 6, and our hours in New Orleans East are 4 to 7 to kind of meet the needs of the out of school time in the community. During the summer, that program transitions from a after school program to a full-time summer camp for the month of July. The month of June, and this year we'll be running them at both locations. So we'll provide a free summer camp for youth ages 7 to 12 years old at both our Central City locations and our New Orleans East locations, where young people are with us from 8 a.m. to 2:30 in the afternoon, breakfast, lunch, field trips, swimming, and then a lot of on-site activities that encompass like arts and crafts and STEM and music and all the variety of things that young people need during the summer to give them a safe place to be.
Yeah, and the last, just the Camp Mariposa programming.
Oh.
So in between all of that for our Yep Enriches program, we host a sleepaway camp 6 times a year. And so that's for kind of a subset of young people between the ages of 9 and 12 that have been impacted by substance abuse in their families. So it's not that those young people are using or abusing substances, but there's someone in their family that sort of struggles in that area. So it's really to help kind of build coping mechanisms and strategies. There's a therapeutic element to it. But also we get kids out of the city and just have like a fun camping experience as well. And so that's sort of like the general pool of young people in our enrichment programming feeds our Camp Mariposa participants. And then this is, so the next couple slides, I'll just kind of
Numbers.
flip through real quick, but this is to give folks an idea of sort of the growth of sort of how we ended up with these 4 different service areas. So a lot of our programs have really grown out of an organic need. And YEP has grown substantially since we were founded in 2004. And so YEP started kind of on the heels of the Act 1225, which was the Juvenile Justice Reform Act of 2003. And so there was a real push back then to reinvest monies that were tied up in the sort of criminal justice system, juvenile justice system back into communities. And so YEP was one of the first juvenile reentry programs in the whole state of Louisiana with some of those reinvestment dollars in 2004. And this little picture up in the corner in that 2004 piece, that was the entire YEP team at that point in time. So we had a really small team. Now I think we have around 55 staff people that we employ either part-time or full-time. That number will jump to probably 65 or 70 over the summer when we hire up for summer camp counselors. But then we've just sort of added on these different kind of program areas and buckets over the years, again, to kind of meet the need. And really our growth and trajectory has been to try to get a little more preventatives, to try to provide, some positive kind of intervention and support earlier in a young person's life and not waiting until they sort of make that big mistake in their life and end up in the juvenile justice system. And then the most recent addition to this sort of growth is our expansion to New Orleans East, which was this past fall. So like July, August of 2022, we expanded out on Hain Boulevard. And so this is some of just our kind of big cumulative numbers over the last 19, 20 years, coming up on our 20-year anniversary. So that we've engaged more than 8,500 young people over the last 19 years. And, we're kind of back on track now. So like many organizations around the city and around the country, like we took a dip in our engagement enrollment during the pandemic. That's sort of climbing back up to around an average of about 800 a year. That we've had 1,500 young people paired with one-on-one mentor since 2004. 575 and counting high school equivalencies since that program's inception. And then since 2012, when our YEP Works programming was started, we've placed 357 young people into jobs.
Our 2022 impact, we served 757 youth across all of our community-based programs. 81% of our young people demonstrated an improvement in their emotional well-being. 94% of our young people felt YEP provided them with opportunities to develop life and coping skills and interact with others. 94% of our young people experienced a sense of community or connection through YEP. And 74% of our participants receiving academic and tutoring support improved their grades and or attendance at school.
And both of these slides are really just kind of a snapshot of kind of all the data we collect and the impacts that we are able to demonstrate. Like Cafe Reconcile, we also use the Efforts to Outcomes database. And so we capture a lot of information that's not only helpful, externally as we talk about our work, but internally so we can like learn from our mistakes and get better and continually kind of improve our programming. This slide is really just to kind of highlight, I'm sure like what y'all spend much of your time talking about, some of the big challenges in our city. And so with truancy rates, sort of grade level reading being, Orleans Parish being a underperforming area, that a lot of our young people struggle with being impacted by violence, and that many young people in our community live in poverty. And so that is the context that we still sort of work in today. And so over this past year, we've kind of made some strategic decisions to build capacity in some areas to address some of these needs. And so Amanda kind of touched on in our enrichment programming as well as our mentoring programming. We've hired a full-time education coordinator to really meet the increased academic needs that a lot of our K-12 students have. We've initiated a partnership with Children's Bureau of New Orleans. I know Reconcile also talked about them and works with the organization, but that's been great. And so now we have an in-house counselor. And so she's actually devoted to YEP 100% of her time. She's housed at YEP. And so we're really trying to eliminate as many barriers to accessing clinical grief and trauma supports as possible for our young people and families. And so our assumption is that, people trust, our young people trust YEP. They like coming to YEP, they like to be at YEP. And so if we can bring these services to a space that they're already comfortable being, hopefully we can increase the engagement in that kind of support. And then in partnership with Educators for Quality Alternatives, or EQA, which is one of the sort of alternative school charters in the city. We've expanded our programming over this last year to New Orleans East. And so it's a beautiful school campus. And we kind of housed in a building and a half-ish. But right now we're operating our adult ed programming at that site, our after-school programming, as well as we host, our mentoring team has an office out there. So they host group activities, do intake appointments, that sort of stuff at that site. And the vision is to also expand our job training program out to New Orleans East. And then Amanda, you're going to talk about summer camp and I said answer.
Yep. So first, in addition to our regular adult ed classes that we've been offering for a number of years, we've had the ability over the last year to expand and offer high set in Espanol. So we are having classes at both our Broad Street location and our New Orleans East location that are specifically for folks whose native language is Spanish. And so we have a full-time instructor now. We have our transition coordinator that is bilingual, so they're providing support, and we've already enrolled 40 participants in that program.
Yeah, and that's one of the definitely fastest growing demographics in our adult ed work. And so it's not like your traditional sort of ESL. So we're not teaching necessarily people, Spanish speakers, to speak English. This is giving the people the opportunity to take the actual HiSET exam in their native language. So it's been great to sort of meet that need over this past year.
And then, as I mentioned earlier, this year, we're able to run 2 summer camp locations, one of which will be in New Orleans East. We can accommodate 50 young people, ages 7 to 12, with a variety of different programs, and we're actively enrolling young people in that program. We want people to know about it. I'm attending community meetings out in the area to make sure that folks know about it, but I just wanted to specifically highlight it today because we're about halfway full and can accommodate another 25 young people. And as somebody mentioned earlier, everybody's talking about, is there things for young people to do? There are things for young people to do. So send them our direction because that's what we want. So if you have anybody that's interested in enrolling in summer camp, they can reach out to the YEP's main office and they'll be directed to the right person. They can call the New Orleans East location and they'll be told how to get a summer camp application. All of those things. And I even brought one today if anybody wants one, and you can make photocopies of it.
Sure. And also too, I know it's a question we often get, all of YEP services are free. So all the services we provide, we have a CEO and a chief fundraiser that does a lot of work and is really good at making sure we have the resources we need to do what we need to do. And we get support from fine folks like yourselves who are supporting our work. So all of our services are free and we don't really have to charge any of our participants anything to engage in the support that they need.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. So free summer camp, free after school care, free drumline, dance classes run by my friend Nikita.
That's correct. Yeah.
That is correct.
And just all the services, including adult education in Spanish, even that you guys are providing. Councilmember Thomas, followed by Councilmember Green.
Thank you. A couple of questions. Of the 8,504 young folk who've been through the system, as you guys survey them and keep their files, what are a couple of the most common things or themes that are attached to those individuals that lend some kind of commonality in terms of them going through YEP or where they are socially?
Yeah. So it definitely, my answer to those kind of questions, it kind of depends on your entry point out folks to YEP. So, and YEP kind of has this reputation that, you know, we work with kids in the justice system, all that sort of stuff. We're actually over 80% of the young people that we serve have no really attachment to any sort of justice. No attachment to the justice system,
Okay,
adult or juvenile. And so we have these like direct referral pipelines for those with our justice system partners, and that's a piece of our work. But a majority of the people that we work with are reaching out and engaging in our services because they have a need and they see YEP as being able to help them meet that need. So with our enrichment program, those are very like neighborhood-based programs. So it's a lot of people that walk or ride a bike, or maybe they have grandmothers stuck in the neighborhood and they get dropped off by us and then walk to grandma's house after school. So it's a lot of folks like in the community. For our adult ed and work readiness programming, it's really a much broader sort of catchment area for young people that are engaged in those services. Again, because they're looking for a specific option and we sort of meet their needs or meet their criteria. And so they're engaging in those two programs. We get a lot of referrals from some of our school partners for our adult ed and work readiness programming. And then our mentoring programs, those are all young people those are sort of a closed referral system. And so those are coming directly from a referral part.
everyone's talking truancy, curfew, schools, responsibility. The schools are talking about how many thousands of kids have opted out. Classrooms, kids for whatever reason are not in public schools or they're staying home. 80% increase over the past 2 years. What do you guys see in terms of truancy? Have y'all done a demographic agenda breakdown in terms of the 80% that you guys have seen that lend to some of the data and some of the information y'all have put together?
Yeah, and you say demographics.
Demographic agenda
Yeah. So you're talking about like
is
like
the truant is purple, the truant is female or male.
I don't think we've done that sort of analysis. If that's something you're interested in, I think we could definitely
Yeah.
give it to you. But I think I don't have the source for that information
Okay.
in the slides, but that was a externally sourced piece of information just about the city as a whole.
Okay.
But I think it reflects our experience that we've had a lot of young people that, you know, just during the pandemic, school really started to feel very optional.
Well,
And so,
Yeah. Well, I just think it's a credit to you guys. You're not a truancy or curfew center, but y'all are
For-
keeping some stats on that information. I think that could be very helpful if you could guys help us with the background, because that's one of the conversations.
Yeah.
The school system and everybody's having today. They're talking truancy, but you guys are actually tracking
for sure.
truants amongst the kids who come to you guys. The last thing I want to say is, if someone isn't a believer in YEP or what you guys do, then we ought to be. You're one of the few programs that are willing to go where the kids are, where the disparity is. And though I'm thankful you guys went to the East, if you look at the demographic breakdown, both post-Katrina and post Hope 6 in public housing, the disintegration of public housing, if you look at the data post gentrification and where populations are dispersed, very few nonprofits are moving to where their service clientele are. I just thought it was really bold, very profound, and very forward thinking in what you guys did in doing what many nonprofits that are 5 and 10 times bigger than you guys are, that have not used their resources to locate where the demographic shift and change is. So I just want to say on behalf of everyone out there and everyone in the city, if you look at the zip codes of young folk and where they're coming from, no matter where they have an impact, I would hope that other nonprofits, many that are extremely huge, they've got millions for decades, would use you guys' model of saying, hey, hold on a second, I know where we are, but this is also when we need to be. We can't thank y'all enough for that. Thank you.
Okay. Sometimes it's a little okay to be redundant. So Councilman Thomas actually asked to well, commenting on what I was going to comment, I just wanted to applaud you all for being in the community, whether it was Oretha Castle Haley, whether it was New Orleans East, where people can easily get to the resources that they need through the through your programs. I do want to also commend you for mentioning a couple of things that are important, and it helps me to continue to emphasize what I say. There's a lot for youth to do in our city. There's a lot. I just want people to take advantage of those opportunities before they criticize in general something that they think exists, but it doesn't. There's no void of programs for youth. It's getting youth to participate in them sometimes, which is the challenge. So we need to continue to talk it up, and the things that we talked about today, Councilmember Harris, is youth gathering, the gathering this week. I came here also recently for the mayor's youth advisory council meeting. And this weekend I participated in by attending and just presenting some proclamations, Carver Drama Club's presentation of Sister Act 2, and also the NAACP Act So competition, where they're going to be sending youth throughout the area. I want to encourage parents and guardians to recognize that there are programs such as YEP's program, the Youth Empowerment Program, and there are other programs in our city that can help our youth to develop and to move forward. As someone who's raised 3 children here in the city who are now young adults, I had an opportunity for them to participate in much of what the city has to offer. And I'm very pleased with what I see in terms of a lot of offerings. Just need to get more youth involved. But thank you very much, Yep, for what you do. And also 25 application options for summer program. I'll be talking about it tonight on on social media. But let's fill those slots in addition to that 1,000 jobs that are out there because of the work of the mayor and the city council together on that. But thank you very much for your work.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both for appearing today and taking some time off from the important work that you do. Are there any openings at the Central City location for summer camp, or are they full?
So I would encourage that we could take a few more in the Central City. We could take a few more in the Central City location, but because it's so neighborhood based and had been around for so long, they fill up. People start by asking us about Central City summer camp in like January. So they're getting pretty full over there.
All right, well, my office will post anyway, and promote promote the opportunities that you all have. And is there anything else that we can do as city council to make sure that we're amplifying the work that you do?
So definitely. So Darren just reminded, so I've been so caught up in summer camp. So our YEP Works program will be running a summer cohort that is open to any youth in the city that are between 16 and 24. It's a great opportunity for youth that are not normally eligible for our program because of their intense school schedule to participate. And so we'll be running that cohort as well.
And that is in your district, Councilmember. That's
Oh, I'm well aware. And listen, if you need bike repair or you need to go clothes shopping, YEP is a good option, as I well know. So I want to thank you not only for the service that you provide to our young people, but to the community, including adults. And as we talk about potentially the DA expanding to the Keller Center, I'm sure there's some natural things that can happen there, especially with adult programs. So thank you again.
Thank you.
And last but not least,
We have the Office of Youth and Families. Is that right? With Asia Hallett, Director of the Office of Youth and Families, and Maria Villamorian Lupin, Deputy Director of Programs, Jack Shevitz, Deputy Director of Policy.
Hey, good afternoon.
good afternoon. Will you introduce yourselves, although you need no introduction?
Absolutely. Asia Hallett, Director for the Office of Youth and Families.
And I'm Anna Maria Villamarin Lupin, Deputy Director of Programs.
I'm Jack Shavitz, a Deputy Director of Policy.
Before we get started, I really appreciated going after YEP when I was a 4th year teacher. I worked their summer program and it's been excellent sense. So
Right.
just want to throw that out there. As we get started on this presentation, we also want to make sure, that when we finish this, we will send out all the information for follow-ups and any other questions or comments that might come up after the presentation. With that being said, our agenda. So we are going to look at some of our ongoing OIA priorities and then also some upcoming initiatives and calls to action, because there's definitely some council support that we would love to call on y'all for. But beginning with our mission and vision statement, I wanted to go ahead and just highlight this piece. I know, again, that community also listens in on these meetings. And so, our office is really here to do some of that macro work where we look across city agencies, looking at how we can expand resources and equitable policymaking. So it's not always that we're doing the direct service. And so I don't ever want community to think that we're not a resource to them. We're really just better suited to connect them to the people on the ground who are best positioned to be a support. And with that being said, we want to ground this work and conversation today in the Youth Master Plan. One of the reasons I thought this would be really important for us to look at, last week I heard Councilman Thomas mention that the need for us to have work that expands and extends beyond any given administration, that really has some teeth in transforming what our community looks like for our young people and families. And so we want to just go ahead and make sure that the Youth Master Plan was top of everyone's mind, because this is a 10-year plan that is in its second year of implementation, which really means that the first year was used on looking at what the priorities need to be. And now this year is the implementation. So that is why you see organizations from across the city grounding themselves in this strategic plan. So that way we have a roadmap over the next 10 years for how to best work together to serve kids and families. And so with that being said, these are kind of our big buckets, our priorities. So our big buckets, and this is not limited, like the work that we do obviously extends beyond this, but our work with the early education, expanding access to parks and recreation, expanding youth voice and family voice into government, increased coordination between agencies and community, and then lastly, but not least, support and advocacy for programs and services that focus on our most vulnerable youth. And so just starting with early education, this morning, I was up here with NOLA PS and Agenda for Children, and they were speaking specifically on the millage. And that is a piece of what we do, but y'all know that was just a starting point. I believe Council Member Moreno mentioned it last week that the money, the millage is that's just our starting point. And so some of the work that our office does is to make sure that we stay on track, implementing the work that is going to be necessary for all the seats to be available to young people. So some spaces that we serve, obviously we manage the millage, the CEA for that millage, but also we are working to increase wage enhancements for our teachers, because obviously if we don't have teachers, it doesn't matter if we have seats. And so that's been a huge focus in the campaign for both Agenda for Children and NOLA PS. We also participate in the New Orleans Early Education Network, KNOWing. And I think that's just, again, a space where city government becomes good partners to the people on the ground doing the work. And then obviously we are going to be working hopefully with council on getting the state match for the millage. So that would give us an additional 1,000 seats, which means that we would be serving 6,000 young people. So, I'll be banging on y'all's emails and calling all y'all's phones for that one. And so where we are today is that we will have those roughly 6,000 seats going into this next year. Another priority is really the expansion of access to our parks and recreation. Two main things that I really want to note about this is the equity and resilience piece. When we talk about serving youth and families, we also need them to have spaces beyond their homes and schools to occupy. They should be able to live amongst the city. And so a big piece of that is equity in who is using our parks. Initially, we've done some research with our parks partners. And one of the things that we're seeing is that our parks are not equitably used across the city. For a city that is majority minority, our parks don't reflect that. And so we are trying to figure out how to change that for our park system. And then there's also the resiliency piece. So making sure that everything that we put into this system really works together. So that way we can not only have these opportunities for community, but also that they are sustaining in our changing climate in New Orleans. One thing that I will add is that, or two things that I'll add, there are going to be several community meetings that are coming up the week of May 8th. And so we'll send that information out to you because the voices, like we literally, we need to make sure that there's equity across voices in our city when it comes to what our parks need to be. And so I will send that out to all of your offices. So that way you can add it to your newsletters. I'm in District D, so I always get greens, but making sure that those come out across the board. Our third priority is looking at the expansion of youth and parent voice within city government. So obviously y'all know about the Mayor's Youth Advisory Council. They are a wonderful group of young people who are incredibly active. They will be completing their fourth session on the 13th. So I will also send that invitation because we would always love to have you. But really a couple of things that I want to highlight from that is their town hall. You know, it was just mentioned that we need to continue to have these. It's not one and done. It's all of us all the time. And so if you want to see just like what came the product of that, just go ahead and visit our website. And then also they're going to be partnering with NORD to put on the Youth Fest. Again, there are so many things happening in our city for young people. So we just want to continue to highlight that. We also have the Parent Leadership Training Institute, which just finished their 9th cohort. One thing that I want to highlight from this, Sharuba Chavez was in one of our previous cohorts, and her project is actually just got voted on by Bessie. It's on changing standards for our EL population, so that way they are able to get their high school graduation requirements. And so that is something that started in the city of New Orleans and is now about to be impacting the state. I think it really just speaks to the talent of our families and also their commitment, despite whatever the narratives may be. We have a lot of people doing good work.
I wanted to add that Raven mentioned something about opportunities for understanding government that came out of the Youth Town Hall. And there is actually something coming up with the Junior Civic Leadership Academy that I know some of you have participated in during the summer to come and talk to young people. And that's a perfect space for them to come for free. This year it'll be 6 weeks. And again, that'll be in the comprehensive summary email in terms of things to do.
Okay, so continuing thinking about increasing coordination between city agencies and communities, one thing that launched this year, which aligns with several partners' priority around grade level reading, is the NOLA Readers 2.0, which is a partnership between the Children's Museum and the libraries. I think this is an especially important partnership because it is a partnership that's not only educational, but it's joyful. I think often we talk about what do our young people need, and we think about like this checklist of all these like incredibly heavy things, and actually they're children. And and they should play, they should have fun, there should be joy, because we want them to keep coming back. And so I think this is a really beautiful experience. It's every Monday. So if y'all have some time, I would go ahead and pop by the Children's Museum and see the good work that's happening there. In this initial pilot, we were looking to serve 1,100 second graders in New Orleans public schools. Again, we want to increase the diversity of who is attending spaces in our city. And we are on track to meet that 1,100, which also means that we're gearing up to expand it to go the entire year instead of just a few months in the spring. So we are trying to get all of our second grade public school students starting in the fall. To the question brought up by Councilmember Thomas, what is happening with truancy and chronic absenteeism? Our office, along with so many community stakeholders, so NOPD, the courts, school leaders, NOLA PS, DA's office, so on and so forth, literally everybody. We have been meeting since last spring. And in that work, we looked at what was happening in our system. So how were young people flowing from schools through to courts, like what was happening? We identified some of the gaps in that space. We also came to a conclusion about what recommendations were necessary for us to clear that up. And so there has been, since our last budget allocation, for $100,000 to support OSA and having social workers who are able to have more touch points with our most in need population of students. A thing that will be coming out of this is data tracking. So one of the questions that you had just asked was, what are the numbers? There's 86,000 kids that we're talking about what's going on. And we are working to support NOLA PS in having a universal data tracking system because baseline, we need that. But you know, that work is something that is ongoing. Again, we will gladly share that information with you. Another space that we occupy, the Louisiana Department of Education, the work that we've been doing with our stakeholders in New Orleans has been used to inform what the state has brought to Bessie for how they're going to tackle truancy across the state of Louisiana. So New Orleans was truly the first city to formally tackle this issue. And although we don't have a perfect answer just yet, it is an ongoing process. And I think the main thing that we wanted to figure out was how do we efficiently and effectively change the system. And so that is the work that's currently happening. And then also we support in just helping organizations navigate the city system. So you'll see on here that we threw in this example about Heroes of New Orleans, which is placed in Algiers. One of the things that we saw, there's a vacancy in some buildings. And so we can't always give money, but if we have these other resources that are for community benefit, we want to make sure that we have good people doing good work in those spaces. And then also another space, working in the early education space, being able to talk to center leaders. We also noticed there's like blight next to a daycare. So we went ahead and went through the process of making sure that that was taken care of, because although we may not be in that specific department, our job as city employees is truly to make sure that we can do whatever we can since we're already in the space. And then our last of our main buckets is supporting and advocating for program and services that focus on our most vulnerable youth and families. And so I know y'all have heard of us talking about our Summer Success Program. That is something that is taking place right now. And this is really a space for us to look at who are our young people who have been impacted by the criminal legal system. So maybe they themselves are involved, or they are individuals that community leaders have identified needing extra support. And so they come into this program, and really we provide a stipend to these organizations to continue doing the work that they do best. You'll notice that these are organizations that exist across our city because, again, this is not one area. This is really a holistic community effort to make sure that we get everyone and support everyone. Yeah. I don't know if there was anything else.
No,
that I
and our
should-
partners here, you can see Cafe Reconcile, who was in the room. And YEP is not only because they serve an older population. Our population here is 14 to 17. So Cafe Rec works with our 16, 17-year-olds. And everybody, it's pretty spread out. We have somebody in every district.
Another one of our programs that we have talked about before is the Pathways program. And so that is going to be for young people who have been involved in the criminal legal system. And the reason that we focus it specifically on that is because the interventions are just more intense. And so this program is really about how do we pair mindfulness and accountability with that workforce development. It's initially a 15-week program, but the young people were like, well, we want more of it. So many of them have done 30 weeks. So 15 weeks of the initial program plus 15 weeks of the alumni work. So 30 weeks is more personal development than a lot of adults get. So I'm really proud of that group of young people, especially because they are the ones who our media has spent a lot of time having a close eye on. I think it's a great opportunity for us to show that they are taking the initiative to evolve. And then also on there is the completion. We recently completed the pilot for the Guaranteed Income Program. One of the reasons that I wanted to highlight this one is because we did the pilot to see what it takes to impact young people, but we already know that over 70% of participants were using those funds for basic needs. So I think there's also this narrative that floats around that when you give people money, they're going to be balling out of control, but really people were eating. And I think that just needs to be understood. So, I mean, I am particularly interested, especially I know Jack has taken the lead on this and has done a really wonderful job and has advocated for the expansion of something like this, because when young people are desperate, they do desperate things, and we actually want to be preventative in that. And then the last couple of things that I want to add, because we know that mental health and wellness is incredibly important. We've been partnering with the Children's Bureau to provide counseling for children and young people involved in the criminal justice system. And so that will be a partnership that we just continue to support. And then the same exists for Ubuntu Village that does similar work for families. And although it's not on here, I think it's maybe on the next slide, maybe. Yeah, in our upcoming initiatives. It's not on here just yet, but one of the spaces that we're really excited about, Travis Hill, won the Aspen Challenge. And so we're going to go visit them next Wednesday. And one of the reasons we want to go visit is because we're like, your plan is actually incredibly feasible. Like, I think we can make something happen. And I was just thinking about that because of the partnerships we already have and the fact that we do systems level work. When young people have these ideas, I think it's just a great opportunity for us to figure out how we can put those things in motion. If they ask, well, I should backtrack and say, there's this quote idea from Brene Brown. I love her, so I'm always going to talk about her. I don't care if we're on the dais or not, but there's a quote from Brene Brown. And one of the things she says that trust is telling someone what you need and believing that they'll act on it. And so I just feel like if we're trying to build trust with young people, especially as a city who they already lived amongst an environment that has failed them, I think it's incredibly important for them to say, like, this is the thing that I need, and for them to see that we move on that. And so that's one of the reasons that we're really excited to go to Travis Hill and visit with those young people. But for our upcoming initiatives and our calls to action, these are places that we need help. So the Civic Leadership Academy, they're open for the summer. So we just want to put that on there. And so we could plug again, there are opportunities. We want young people to support the hard work and beautiful programming that Neighborhood Engagement puts on. And so we want to make sure that we just said that here. Also, NORD is hiring for our lifeguards. I sent an email, I've been emailing everybody, but in particular wanted to reach out because one, we want to open our pools, but also this is income for our young people. And so, we can take care of those two things, something to do recreational, but also something to do financial, both live within this space of making sure we have lifeguards with NORD. And then the last piece was the community surveys with the Big Green Easy. So we will send out the links for that. Again, we want community voice, we want community involvement. So we'll make sure that all of those are accessible to all of council. And then we wanted to leave on a high note because I know that we are often in a space of solving problems, but not always in a space of remembering our why. We sat in council last week and just loved so many moments that we saw here. And so we just wanted to go ahead and mention that again. At the bottom picture with the young people from Alice Hart was at the Children Museum. So it was super precious. And then Zoe at the top, she is a children's author. So she came and she was reading her book and again, just like incredibly sweet moments. And truly a reminder that like the work we do is just to better people's lives and well-being. So we just want to share that. And with that, we'll leave it to any questions or comments or needs.
Thank you for ending on a high note. They are amazing, and it's just so
So-
touching to see them and their bravery and courage just appearing before us, because it takes courage to come here and to talk to people who often are looking at their phones, not paying attention. But I hope we, specifically pay attention to our young people. Councilmember Thomas and then Councilmember Green.
First of all, thank you for your presentation and thank you for the work that you do. In reading your piece, you guys use the term, I think 145 opportunity youth, especially with the $400,000 in terms of they access that number. In the last administration, they identified 30 or 35,000 opportunity youth. First, what is an opportunity youth? And if in the previous administration, they identified between 30 and 35,000 opportunity youth, how many do we have now?
Yeah, I think so. I think the slide you're referring to is number 12. So that was in reference to the guaranteed income program. So that program only had capacity, I think, to serve 125 opportunity youth. So I think the number in total of opportunity youth, I don't know the exact number, but I think is obviously much more than that. That program, I think, again, was just supporting we had a budget to serve just under 125 young kids.
Yeah, I mean, no, and I appreciate that. But if in the last administration, we've identified over 30,000 opportunity youth, then the only way to determine success is how we impact that number, whether it's 145, whether it's other programs, and especially if it's the office that you guys represent. I think it would be really important to know that a number was identified in the previous administration. This is the number we have now, and this is how we're reducing that number. So I didn't establish the last number. All I know is that it was done within the confines of City Hall and city agencies. So I think it would be helpful to know, is that number still the same? Has that number gotten smaller, or are they more?
Yeah. I mean, what I can tell you, I don't have that number off the top of my head, but I completely agree that it's a number that is important for me to know. What I will do following this meeting is pulling that data and seeing, because I'm not actually sure whose office pulled that initially. But like I said, I think it's important to live with me. Just as the director, I should know that. So yeah, I can get that information.
Okay, and I never got a definition from,
Opportunity youth.
of course, I wasn't here before, but they would come on the morning show and talk about opportunity youth program. What is you guys' definition of opportunity? What is an opportunity youth?
Yeah. So a lot of the conversations about opportunity youth is really our young people who are most in need. So we think about intersections of poverty. We think about intersections with criminal legal system. We look at intersections of all of these spaces where our young people just need extra support. I would go as far as to say is that, I mean, I think it's not just, I think all of our children need better options, more access, but I really think it is about that space of income, opportunity, what systems they've interacted with, and those extra supports to make sure that they're well.
Okay, but thank you. So it's really young folk who don't have or who need opportunity.
Yeah.
So.
I mean, I would say that it's difficult for me to answer that because I think there generally needs to be more opportunity for young people in general, right? Like, there's programming, there are those things, right? But I mean, the quality of what I think young people deserve, I think is actually different than, which is why I'm like, I understand what you're saying in your definition, but I think it's really the more extreme cases.
Yeah, I just think this is important, lady, chair, because we do a good job in this community of identifying how many and who and where the problem is.
Yeah.
But we never seem to come back and say, here's where we are now. We've made a marketable impact. And I think it would be good to know, especially given the good work that you guys are doing,
Yeah.
how we're chipping at that
Yeah.
group, how we're targeting that group.
Yeah.
Can we take the 145 opportunity youth and now subtract them from the 30,000?
Mm.
So,
Yeah.
so now is it 29,000?
Yeah,
uh,
yeah,
800 and
I think that's a good point. I think one of the
35.
things, and I think you were the one who said this last week, that this is an ongoing
Okay.
experience for young people. So I think, the guaranteed income program is necessary, right? It doesn't always change this holistic experience that they're having as a
Yeah.
human though. One thing that is on top of mind, I mentioned our Pathways program, but even in the past week, we lost a young person who did 30 weeks of that intensive work, right? So it didn't stop being an opportunity youth because he has
Mhm.
done the work of like mentally maybe changing how he sees the world, because he's still in an environment
Mhm.
that killed him.
Mhm.
So like he's still an opportunity youth.
Mhm.
And so that's why I'm saying I don't know how to quantify. And again, that is very much the work I'm happy to do. What stops you now from being an opportunity youth when so much of your life experience is intersecting in a way that even when you do one thing right, there's something else that's coming at you. So like I said, I understand what you're saying. I haven't figured out how to best navigate when you stop being one thing and get to another space when your holistic experience is challenging.
Well, I just think given the work that you guys are doing with the seats for early childhood education, some of the outreach, the
Yeah.
assistance with the youth violence piece, that it's time for us to start knowing, understanding if that number is going down.
Right, absolutely.
If we're impacting, we're giving out money, we're supporting programs, but if the number's growing or if it's stagnant, then what are we doing wrong? Or what do we need to do differently?
Yeah.
The last thing is from
Absolutely.
the impacted group, do you guys know where they're coming from? The zip codes, the neighborhoods where they live,
For who?
the groups that you guys are impacting?
Yeah, so all of our programs, we track all of that data. And again, more than happy to share that with you.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, we do look at all of their zip codes, what districts they're
Okay.
coming from, what schools they're coming from. So yeah, we do have that.
All right, thank you very much.
And I might add that we do have that data available. You can click on our data tools on our website. We'll include that.
Yeah.
And we have reports from a third party that has done evaluations of the impact of our programs.
All right, thank
So
you.
we'll send that.
Councilmember Green.
Could you tell the public on the record about early childhood education and how they enroll children in the program?
Yeah, so for early child education, they actually would just go to the NOLA PS website to do that enrollment process, the same as similar to how we would do one app. But we've learned a lot of lessons. And I want to say that because I have heard feedback from community. NOLA PS has heard feedback from community. And so it is the same idea that you just go to the website, you fill in the information. I attempted to do it with my daughter, but she didn't have a social security number yet, so I can't do it. But it actually was a pretty simple system this time around for you to just go to nolaps.com and then enroll for a city seat.
I think that I was under the impression that if the voters passed the millage increase, that the state automatically kicked in. So that's not correct. What do
Well,
we have to do to get that 1,000 seats
Yeah.
back? I kind of told people that there was gonna.
well, that's okay. You're going to be a good partner to us then.
So yeah, we put in the application to the Louisiana Department of Education for the full match. The tax will collect around $21 million, we think, by the end of this year. So we put in that full application. We are waiting, I think in the next Bessie board meeting, I think it's next month. Well, that'll actually be voted on. So within the next 3 to 4 weeks, we'll probably know how much they're going to approve us for. Obviously, a lot of it's dependent on, what's actually in the matching fund, but we'll know more about that. And obviously we have a lot of advocates for advocating to put more money in that matching fund. I think obviously, because we want to use it every year, if it's one-time money, then, in 5 years, we could extinguish it all. So we're going to get more, reoccurring revenue in there.
Is it safe to call you all the point persons on
Yes.
that? So let
Yes.
us know as a council, because we
Yes.
did pass a resolution supporting it, and we were all out there talking about the efficacy and the benefits of the early childhood education millage. And people really always want to know that some of the things that are suggested are going to happen. And one of the things that they think is that the state is putting up the resources to add those additional seats. It sounds like you're telling me that it doesn't have to be a limit of 1,000, it could be even more. I mean.
Yeah, I mean,
we
if we
all
get
have
the
to
21
1,000.
million, we can allocate it in different ways. We could put it all to seats, but I think, the goal would be 1,000, more seats. Yeah.
Okay, a few people have talked to us about truancy.
Mhm.
So I'm gonna ask, how are you working with the New Orleans Public Schools on truancy?
Yeah.
Directly and honestly, for the sake of the public, how is it working? I think that people feel that they see a lot of youth on the streets during the day and that they're truants, but maybe they aren't. Maybe there are programs, maybe they're senior day out. So let's talk about truancy for a second to the public. What's going on and how is the New Orleans public school system itself, which is the first, if you will, line of prevention for truancy, working with you?
Well, I will say, if I just start at the schools and work my way through the system, our schools, our educators, our school leaders, our CMO leaders have been working their tails off and really doing exceptional work. And this conversation has started because they're saying we need more help. Like, we've done all of these interventions in-house, like now we need more support. And from there, we started looking at NOLA PS and partnering them to see like how are young people flowing from the schools into the NOLA PS system. And again, I will say NOLA PS has been great partners at every single step. When we started last spring until now, they have been willing and able to work with us to consider new ways of doing things, to show us the research, right? Because sometimes it's not that it's not the right stuff. It's just not at the magnitude that it needs to be at, which is actually what we found, that the intervention itself, when young people were able to get that intervention, it was getting them back into schools. But they don't have, they're increasing now, right? Their capacity to be able to do that for all of the young people who flow through the system. I don't think it's inaccurate for people to say like, hey, I'm seeing like young people outside, what's going on? But I think, well, what I know is NOLA PS in particular, and I don't mean this to be just a NOLA PS issue because it truly is not, but what I do know is that they have said that we are willing to expand our capacity to make sure that we're not just serving a small waft of young people, but that we're getting everyone in a decentralized system that also comes down to schools being ready to partner with them and saying like, this is our need. And I've seen the schools hop on board and say, okay, like we're going to do whatever it takes to fix this. I don't think that for a system that has been decentralized and has recently gone through a leadership shift, which I think, it's a natural occurrence in all of these spaces. I don't know how I just lost my train of thought, but I don't know. I was just talking and lost my train of thought.
I'm not trying to put pressure on just,
No.
I know it's more complex.
No, I mean,
I'm
I
talking to the
think
public.
my train of thought really just went to a place of when we started looking at this system, we didn't expect it to work flawlessly the first time we ran it. And so we really looked at creating this system so that way we could see what some of the gaps and holes were and how young people were flowing through it. So I'm not surprised that people are saying we're still seeing young people or the problem is not fixed yet. And the problem's not fixed yet because it's several agencies working to fix this one thing. And so, we're really looking at ourselves as a city. What are the things that we are doing as a city that make truancy harder to track? How are we not showing up as a court system? How are we showing up as a district? Like there's so many different players that have been working incredibly hard, but have not been succinct. And I think that's the work. And I think it will take another year or so to see how everything is played out, because there are so many little pieces that are coming together, data systems that hadn't existed before, or they're now archaic. Like, we didn't know about that stuff until we started running the system. So we're like uncovering new things all the time that need to be updated for us to have a better system. So again, I'm more than happy to keep y'all in the loop about how this is constantly changing. I actually sent, you may have gotten the email that I sent maybe a couple hours ago on truancy, and just kind of like where we are right now and then what people can expect. But it's an ongoing process, one that you should expect updates and outputs from, but there's not like a clear cut, like this is going to be fixed by tomorrow.
My office probably has the email because I was at.
Oh, yeah, no, you were
so
here
had
when
to
I
check
sent it.
So
No worries.
bottom line is that, but where are we right now? In terms of, for example, the attendance tracking system, which explained that. I mean, why do we not have a central attendance tracking system? And if we don't, then how do we know how many youth at one time in the system are not in school?
Yeah, so we don't. And so
It's not necessarily on us though, as a city,
I think I mean,
or is it?
well, it's complicated. I will say that there is not a centralized system, and part of that is just the decentralization of our schools. However, that has not stopped NOLA PS from figuring out how to centralize that data without having to centralize the whole system. So basically, they have a system that is going to speak to all of the systems. So when schools upload their info and it comes to NOLA PS, it'll just talk to each other there, as opposed to having to switch what everyone's doing. And so that's a new thing that is coming, I think, by the summer. I'm also just want to add that even if they look at the state doesn't have good data.
Well, then how are we coming up with numbers as to how many students are truant on any particular day?
Yeah.
Are we just extrapolating, or we just
Yeah.
kind of
So the individual schools, they can report, and they have been. They've been, and
to whom? How do we know the number across the 100+ schools?
yeah. So during the pandemic, they did have to submit data. And so that is like starting point that NOLA PS was able to see, like, these are the numbers at that moment. That's also a moment when they realized that the way that they were collecting data was too overwhelming without a unified system. So that is, again, that's why I'm saying, like, there's trigger points, like you asked for this one thing and then it triggered a need for something else. And so that's what's been happening kind of back and forth. So that was like an initial data point where they were able to see, like, okay, this is where all the schools are at. Since we started the process, schools will openly tell you, this is what our data looks like. So they're not trying to like keep secrets or, hide anything like that. If I say, hey, we're looking at this, can you show us what your data looks like so we can, better support? They're able to do that. Also, when they do referrals to NOLA PS can see all of the referrals because they're coming to NOLA PS, right? So they were able to gather those numbers and say, we were able to do 2,000 truancy check requests, and we had this many more to do, which is how they were able to pull that number and figure out what their capacity is. We're also able to look at FINS numbers, right? So when schools are referring to FINS, then we would say, hey, FINS, what are your numbers looking like? FINS would say, hey, here's our numbers, right? Again, like another great resource that is open to, like, this is what these numbers look like. If we ask the courts, we say, hey, courts, how many young people came to you? Right. And the courts say, this is how many young people we have. We asked NOPD, how many young people did you pick up? So this is like the work that we spent the past year doing, of saying, hey, different institutions that interface with young people, give us your numbers. And that's how we were able to start putting these pieces together. But truly the first leg of the work was research, of saying, like, where are these young people? Where are they flowing? How many of them are there? Like, that is what we initially spent last spring doing, because there isn't a unified space to do it. So we really did have to go from house to house to figure out what those numbers were.
So what's the attendance tracking system going to look like when it's finished?
I don't actually know that. I know, so
It's New Orleans Public Schools' responsibility.
Yeah. But again, they've been great partners, so that's not going to be difficult information to convey back to y'all, which is why we sit in that space, to make sure that y'all know what the work has been.
I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot, but it's an obvious question, because I see in the paper people estimate the number of kids who are truant on any day. And it becomes hard for the New Orleans Police Department and others to, if you just say, I estimate, For example, there were some times that, kids aren't truant, but people think that they are. For example, there was a senior day recently and people were off and a lot of people were saying, why are these children off? They had their uniforms on, well, they got a half day off. It would be good to kind of know and to be able to track who's actually truant.
Yeah.
Versus who's not in school or had a half day. And I know that that's hard, but I just hope that the
It's not.
attendance tracking system can make it a little bit easier for all who are involved.
Yeah, but Councilman, it really shouldn't be unless we're dealing with hypothetical or imaginary children. There's a kid who's supposed to be, who's enrolled in school. And there's a kid who either checks he's there or not. So how do you guesstimate
Yeah, I was going to say
something
this.
that is,
The system's a little bit different than that. So
Okay.
they're able to see if you were yes or no there at school, but that's actually not how young people are skipping school. So they might miss a class. So we actually need like an individual class's attendance as opposed to just like the daily attendance, because that's actually where it's getting messed up. If you look at any of our schools' daily attendance, it doesn't look too awful. But now if you look at class by class, that's where it starts getting shaky.
That's
But
how I used to
that's,
skip
but
school.
that is something we uncovered.
That's how I used to skip school was I would show up for my first
Yeah.
period.
you
and
checked in and checked out.
Paris outing herself.
But honestly, Councilmember Thomas,
Oh, this was a real person.
but that's how, that's one of the things that we uncovered, right? Like we didn't know that that's what it looked like until we started digging, which then created a new host of problems because we were like, oh, snap. Like,
You learn every day.
yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, I just look forward to seeing that. I know it's confusing.
Absolutely.
Sometimes children are out because they're sick, for example. But I think if we had an idea of what numbers we were looking at, we could kind of know,
Absolutely.
for example, the type center that we have to have, if we have to expand the size of it. For example, someone who is picked up for truancy, there's all kind of discussion as to where they go, but where do they go?
Yeah, so there's two options. They either go to the Truancy Center on the Mahalia Jackson campus for NOLA PS, or the NOPD officer will just return them to their school. Those are the two options for how that works. And more often than not, they'll return them to the school because we want you at school. And again, NOLA or NOLA PS, NOPD, they have been completely willing to do whatever they need to do. I think our ask of them is changing as our need has changed. And so that's one thing that our role is to go back to NOPD and say, this is how the need has changed. How can we now do this? And so that's something that we figure out. But NOPD was at the table and they have been wonderful partners the entire time. So like it really has been a group of people really trying to figure this out. And it's been nice.
And thank you for saying that, because some members of the public, and look, I just go to meetings and people ask, and I don't sometimes have the answer. Why isn't the NOPD picking up these kids who are walking? Well, it's not that simple, I mean, sometimes truancy gets confused with someone who was released from school or
Yeah.
someone who
Yeah.
might have gone home with their parent or someone who's sick.
Right. Well, and also the way that young people are skipping, they're at home a lot of times. They're
Uh,
at a friend's house. They're, you know what I mean? So they're not always just wandering. Sometimes, sometimes they might be outside, but it's changing. And that's again, a part of the work of us figuring out like, okay, well, you're not playing basketball on the court anymore. Where the heck did you go?
Right.
So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you for your
Yeah.
presentation. And the
of course.
Thank you so much for appearing today. I just want to just touch quickly on the early education seats.
Yes.
So we have 5,000 with the potential of another 1,000,
We have 6,000.
5,000.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I misspoke.
Yeah, we have 5,000 totally publicly funded across different funding streams. So, and then of those 5,000, the city through the millage funds 1,000 directly.
Okay, and then how many seats potentially could we fund
Another
additionally?
1,000
So
with the state match. Sorry.
I'm talking about the total population of children who are eligible for,
Oh, it's like 8,500, like that.
so we have a gap. Even if we get the 6,000, we have a gap of about 2,500 seats
Mhm.
that we could literally fund.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gender for Children presented this morning at the community development, so we
I
can pull
missed
that
it.
slide
Okay,
and get it to you. I don't know the exact, delta of how many kids aren't served, but we have that.
yeah, we had some incidents in District B, so I unfortunately missed that meeting, but listen, I appreciate your work, especially through all of this, and look forward to working with you.
Wonderful. Thanks, y'all.
you.
And again, just reach out to us if there's something that you need. So,
Thank you.
yep. All right, y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anita, there's one more agenda item. There was a public comment on this, but she's left, so,
I have one online comment.
okay, you want to read it?
Oh, for the motion agenda item.
Okay, well, let's get to number 7 and then we can be done. Thank y'all.
So the next item on the agenda is the motion contract for ending HIV epidemic initiative. The committee will consider approval of the motion for allocate $1.9 million of designated federal funds towards ending the HIV epidemic.
Jeannie, do you want to just do a quick overview and then if anybody has any questions, then we'll kick to the full council rather than voting? Don't you think, Anita? Okay, cool.
Okay, great. We didn't prepare anything official. You should have all the contract documents in front of you. I'm Jeannie Donovan, Deputy Director at the New Orleans Health Department, and we are here before you today with a motion to approve a contract. It's a multi-year contract between the State Department of Health and the city, but it's actually federal funds that flow through LDH to the New Orleans Health Department for the ending the HIV epidemic CDC grant. So we've got our program manager, Daniel Murdoch here, who oversees our ending the HIV epidemic program. It's actually the program itself within NOHD is funded through 2 federal pots of money, one of which we received directly, which Daniel currently oversees, and the CDC funding will come in from the state and will form the other funding for the other half of the program, essentially.
Yeah, and just to give you a little bit of background on the ending the HIV epidemic initiative or EH.
Closer to the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Just to give you a little bit of background on the ending the HIV epidemic initiative or EHE for short. This is a federal program. As Jeannie said, we receive direct funding from the Health Resources and Services Administration. And the contract before you is in agreement with the state for funds that they receive that are designated for Orleans Parish. And so those funds are designated to be used for HIV prevention initiatives, including a mobile health team, community health workers, as well as other initiatives like workforce development and social marketing and health literacy for people at high risk for HIV.
Councilmember Green.
Can you talk a little bit more about that, the mobile program and how it works and just in general, this is about 500,000 a year and we want to end AIDS and HIV, but specifically on the mobile, how does that work? And can someone call and say, I'm having an event, can you help me? For example, were you all involved with the weekend's activity? I noticed that they were doing HIV testing at the Youth NOLA Summit. Is that the kind of thing that this grant would fund?
Yeah, so the way that the funds are designated is the HRSA funds that we receive as a city directly are for primarily for treatment, whereas the CDC funds that are the subject of this contract are primarily for testing initiatives and prevention initiatives for people who are not living with HIV but may be at high risk.
How do you identify the people who are tested?
How do I identify them?
Or how are they identified? That's
So we have a we have funding for a particular agency that provides mobile testing services, and then we also have an at-home testing initiative. So we promote it's a text-to-test line. Individuals who are interested in acquiring an at-home HIV test can text this line, leave their contact information, and then one of our community health workers reaches out to them and drops off a test at their home. And then we document their demographic information and test result.
right. So this is going to be mostly testing through mobile and also through persons accessing the home testing kits.
Yeah, so the community health workers, that is one of their responsibilities. And they also work with our Ryan White Part A funded agencies to help bring folks who are living with HIV, who have discontinued care, help bring them back into care, and make sure that they have access to supportive services.
Can you give us any good information on numbers? Are we doing well as a city in that regard? Because of course, the goal of all this is to end,
So we actually just did a quality improvement effort. So in total, we've got just over 8,000 people in the New Orleans metro area who are living with HIV.
Metro, you said Metro?
Yeah, in the metro area, yeah. And we identified that there were 786 people who received care in 2021, but did not receive care in 2022. And so that is one of the efforts that we're focusing on with the community health workers that will be funded under this contract.
Okay. I didn't know the number was so high in terms of metropolitan area. That's troubling, but I mean, it's kind of goes along with a few other things that are troubling, but 8,000 is a significant number. And you said that basically of that 8,000, so I can understand that number, 700 or so are receiving the treatment and the rest are just living with HIV?
So that 700 are people who are out of care.
What does that mean? What do you mean?
So those are people who received care in 2021, but did not receive care in 2022. And
Okay, because not because they just stopped coming, but because they were
because of a number of factors,
cured.
no, well,
Word.
pandemic related factors. A lot of people struggle with access to childcare, transportation to appointments. And so that's what we're working on now, is to identify those needs and get those people back in care.
Okay. But this grant doesn't necessarily do that part of it, right? Right?
Yes,
Yes or no?
This
It does
grant-
not or it
This
does?
grant is trying to bring people back to care.
yes, yes,
Through this grant?
Yeah.
yes.
Okay, I mean, I hope that can happen. I hope that there's no one out there who's not, of course, it's obvious that there are people who aren't getting treatment because they can't get to where they need to be to get the treatment. So
Yeah.
anything that we can do, I'm just hoping that we can reduce those numbers, just as I see other factors in health that we want to help to reduce numbers of people who are negatively impacted. That's all. But okay, I look forward to reading more. All right.
Thank you.
Anita, there's an online comment.
This is from Shanika Bowser. She says $1.9 million has the ability to be overlooked as impactful towards the current quality of life when we reflect on the previous 3 years and the situations that have significantly impacted the quality of life and should be healed before ending the HIV epidemic that we haven't previously been able to end with similar funding. The question of the delegation of funds for this matter should be a public discussion before provided for the attempt to aid individuals who are impacted by this infectious disease epidemic. As such, an epidemic affects us, the community as a whole. It's the end of the comment.
Great. There's enough of us to go ahead and move this to full city council. So I'll go ahead and make the motion. Can I get a second? Seconded
Second.
by Councilmember Green. All in favor?
Aye,
Everyone's in favor of it. Can I get a motion to adjourn?
so moved.
Moved by Councilmember Green, seconded by Councilmember Thomas. All in favor? Aye. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank
Great
you.
presentation.
Thank you.